Welcome to Basic Business Statistics with your instructor, Dr. Todd Daniel.
So welcome to week 2 of our socially distanced Basic Business Statistics course. I'm Todd Daniel and I want to welcome you back. We had our first week in which we reviewed some basics about statistics, and this week will be unlike probably any other week in that this is a skills building week. It means the video is going to be a little shorter this week, and we're going to be focusing on actually practicing with Excel, and I'm going to show you another bit of statistical software that we will be using in the class. So we will be using 2 software packages most commonly, and they will be Excel and JASP. So our task for this week is to do some tutorials on Excel. Those are linked into the class through Cengage. And then also to get introduced to this new statistical program called JASP. If you have Blackboard up, you can just take a look at the overall, let's say block A. And what you'll notice is that in block A, we have 4 folders and a 5th one which says test 1. So each week has a weekly folder. And when you click on week 2, you will see an introduction, and there's a table now that tells you the kinds of things that we'll be covering that week. And that should help you keep on track to make sure that you're getting everything done. And as you scroll down through Blackboard, you will see section 1 and section 2, and for this week, there are links to the Cengage site for Excel tutorials. What I've tried to do is break it up into either 4 or 5 sections, just to give you some structure for a week. So if you wanted to work on it, maybe an hour a day, you could work on this sequentially. The structure should be then you start at the top and just work your way down. When you get to the bottom of the page, many weeks there will be a weekly assignment. This week, because of the way that the tutorials work, where they're worth 10 points each, I don't have a weekly assignment, but you'll be earning really the equivalent of a test worth of points in 1 week by doing those tutorials. But when you get to the bottom of a typical week, there'll be a weekly assignment that's related to what we covered in class. When you get to the bottom of the page, you'll know that you've completed everything for that week and you're ready to move on. I do have some students who are already working either all the way through week 2 or very close to wrapping up week 2 already, so feel free to work ahead. Nothing wrong with that. But it also gives you some flexibility if you joined late or you've had difficulty getting your Blackboard connected with Cengage or something like that. We still have some flexibility with the deadlines so that you can complete the assignments and not have to stress about missing a deadline and losing points unnecessarily. So I mentioned we will be using 2 types of software. If you've paid attention to the title of the book, it's Modern Business Statistics with Microsoft Excel. So clearly we'll be using Excel for part of what we'll be doing, and we'll be focusing on Excel quite a bit for today. Should we use Excel for statistics? Well, that has been a question for many years. For the longest time, at least from when I started doing stats until somewhat recently, the answer was either a no or an unqualified or qualified yes. You can use it for some things, but not for other things. Excel is great in statistics for categorical data, makes charts and graphs pretty easily, doing simple analyses. You can get a lot done with Excel. Learning Excel is great for employability. The more that you know about how to use Excel, the more marketable you could be when it comes time to be looking for a job. But is Excel good with inferential statistics? There are really 2 reasons that we could look at as why Excel might not be the best choice. One has to do with the math. In earlier versions of Excel, because of the choices that were made in the programming, you could get different results running the same data in Excel than you would from R or Stata or SPSS. Now, those differences really were more noticeable with very large or very small numbers. If you were doing very detailed work that goes out to a large number of decimal points, then Excel would give you some different answers. On the other hand, for most of what we do, certainly what we would do in an introductory statistics class, Excel was good enough. Now, the current version of Excel has corrected those differences. So you can reliably use Excel for most of the statistics that you might want to do, certainly in business statistics, and do so with confidence. But the other point is that there is much to remember when you're using Excel with statistics. So for instance, you can collect some data and run a t-test, but then you also need to remember to run the probability for that t-test. And if you wanted confidence intervals, you need to program for both of those. So because there's much to remember, there's also much to forget, meaning that you could run an analysis and there's probably information that you should have that you don't get because Excel just gives you what you ask for. If you don't know how to ask for it, that could be a limitation. Now, there are programs that could be attached with Excel, like Excel Miner, that can really help with this. And they give you much more output than you would get just from running each step of the analysis yourself. So should we use Excel for statistics? Well, we're going to for this class for a number of reasons. But I don't just want to leave you with only Excel. And that's where the second program comes in. It's called JASP. And JASP is a program that has many advantages for when we do inferential statistics. Here are 4 advantages. Number 1, it's free. So this is an open source program, free to download. And what that means is that unlike a program, let's say like SPSS, where I could teach you to use SPSS, but it's a very expensive program, and after this class is over, everything that you know about SPSS you couldn't really apply in the business world unless the company where you worked happened to own SPSS. Whereas with an open source program, it's a skill set that you can take with you. So what I'll teach you about using JASP, you will be able then to use moving forward. You'll be able to continue to use these skills. Number 2, JASP is friendly and user friendly. It's easy to learn, which for me means it's easy to teach, and it's easy for you to use. So very clear, very intuitive. I'm going to show you just a quick example of that coming up. You'll see how readily you can do statistics in a way that you simply can't do, and certainly not nearly so easily with a program like Excel. JASP is flexible, so it works with existing data sets. Now, the one that we want to talk about is Excel, because JASP does not open Excel files directly. You have to convert the file to a CSV first. Simple enough to do. I'm going to show you how to do that today. But with that one little caveat, you can use Excel data sets with a quick little conversion and use those in JASP. There are other programs like SPSS. You can download an SPSS data set and open that directly in JASP. And finally, JASP is functional. The programs that I use the most personally would be R with RStudio, SPSS, and JASP. And I guess Excel as well, but for statistics it'd be those first 3. The great thing about R is its flexibility. You can do any type of analysis using R, but the trade-off is the learning curve. It is difficult to learn, and that makes it more difficult to teach. The frustration level, much higher learning R and RStudio. SPSS doesn't have that steep of a learning curve. I can teach you SPSS very easily, and you can be up and running with SPSS. But the trade-off there is that it's a proprietary program, so it's going to cost money. I have to buy a license every year. If you don't have a license to use SPSS, you can't use it. So it's expensive. So R is free, but difficult to learn. SPSS is easy to learn, but expensive. And JASP is free and user-friendly. So that's why I've chosen JASP for a class like this. I found last semester that most of my students said, I'm so glad we had JASP. I ended up using JASP instead of Excel for a lot of my assignments. So I will let you make your decision on that, but I guarantee you that the time that we spend learning JASP is going to be well worth it. You will get a reward in saving time and effort and frustration by this learning. What I want to do is give you a quick overview of Excel, and then a quick overview of JASP, and then we'll just turn to Blackboard and we can look at some of these assignments that you'll be working on for this week. So I'll start with Excel, introducing you to the workspace. I hope that this is so basic that you're almost bored. You've seen this before, you're familiar with this. Let me just introduce you to some of the terminologies. When you open up a new Excel workbook, it looks a little bit like this. Now obviously I'm using Mac, and the screenshots that you see come from a Macintosh computer, but with Excel, with all of the Microsoft Office suite, you'll notice that what you see on PC is very transferable to what you see on the Mac. There's very, very similar images between them. So we open up a workbook and it's full of cells, hence Microsoft Excel. In this worksheet, we may have multiple tabs. You can always add a new tab by clicking on the plus sign and add multiple sheets or tabs. Those sheets kind of lay on top of each other, like you would if you had a flipped notebook. And you could move from sheet 1, kind of flip to sheet 2. New information is on sheet 2. You can link between them. You can have information on one sheet and reference it back on your first sheet. And then all of the sheets are made up of cells. Now the cells are just rows and columns. With JASP, with SPSS, we put variables in columns, and we put the observations in rows. Cases go in rows. Excel doesn't restrict you to that, but it's still best practice to, if you're creating a data set, create it in that way. It's going to make it much easier to import into other statistical programs. Each cell has a name, and the name of that cell is its column letter followed by its row number. That's why I've circled here, this is cell A2. When you put numbers into an Excel cell, those numbers are called values. If you put text into a cell, those are called labels, the terminology that Microsoft gives us. If we want to work with more than one cell at a time, we could reference the beginning cell and the ending cell separated by a colon. So in this case, we are looking at cells A2 to A4. This is working through a column. If we're looking at a row, we might reference cell A2 to C2. Those are our columns. And we could also work with an array of cells, and we would reference these by referencing the upper left cell, A2, followed by the lower right cell, C4, and this is called an array. Once we have our data in Excel, we'll be using formulas and functions to do things to those numbers, to create charts and graphs and analyses and means and standard deviations. Those functions and formulas will go into a formula bar, which is above our array of cells. The range of cells goes into parentheses. We're referring to cells, say, A2 to A4. Those are engaged in parentheses, or contained within parentheses. All right. So those are some basics about Excel. And the terminology is what we see, what we're going to be using. Again, I hope that that's familiar to you. You've seen that before. But that will be our starting point for the tutorials that we'll be working on today. The second bit of software that we'll be using is called JASP. And JASP is that open source software that I mentioned a moment ago. We can find JASP by going to jasp-stats.org. And I have included a link to this website in Blackboard so that all you need to do is click on that, takes you to the download page. You can download the version that is best for your computer. If you use a Mac like I do, there's a Macintosh version. They have versions for the current operating system as well as previous operating systems. And for PCs, they have options for 32-bit and 64-bit. There also is options for Linux if you use a Linux system. So you'll download this program, you'll install it on your computer, and when you open it up, it'll look like this welcome page. The current version is 0.14.1. I've given a series of videos that we can follow along for our own training. And the place where we should start anytime we're doing an analysis is with this, it's sometimes called a hamburger stack or pancake stack. That's our start button. And when you click on that, we can choose Open, Data Library, and we'll find a list of installed data sets. So these are data sets that come with the JASP program. In this case, I've chosen t-tests and a program called Kitchen Rolls. That is a data set that you will see in one of the introductory videos, and the videos will walk you through each of the steps to get to this point. When you do an analysis with JASP, you will pick the analysis from the top row. In this case, I've just started with simple descriptive statistics. And it's very simple, very intuitive to do an analysis. On the left side, we have this array of boxes that contains all of the variables in our data set. And you simply move a variable from that left box into the right variables box. And what you will see is JASP progressive disclosure. What that means is, as soon as you begin moving variables into the variables box, you will see output appearing in this right output window or results pane. To do any particular analysis, for instance, a plot, we have twirl down triangle menus, opens up an array of plots. For instance, you can just see the top of a distribution plot. Right here, it's a bar chart. We have frequency tables for nominal and ordinal variables. And then up here, for the scale variable, we have the basic descriptive statistics like mean and standard deviation, minimum and maximum. If we wanted additional statistics, we would find those here with this twirl down menu. And to get them, let's say we wanted a median, all you do is click the box that says median. Same for mode or sum. What you will see, especially next week when we start using Excel to make frequency tables, is I'll show you how to create a frequency table in Excel. And then you can do the same thing in JASP, and you'll find that 2 or 3 clicks, you've got your frequency table, versus all of the work that we do in Excel. So again, I'm not at all surprised when students say, I prefer using this one over Excel. I want to teach you Excel because it's important to know, but I also want you to have this option, and it's up to you which one you use for a particular analysis. Remember last week I spent a lot of time talking about scales of measurement, and we had nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. One thing to note is that JASP will do what SPSS does, and that is calls nominal, ordinal, and interval and ratio are both called scale. And the way that you will know that is you will look at these icons. At the top we see variables, and we spoke last week about creating categorical variables and continuous variables. So we'll start with categorical variables. The way that JASP will represent these variables, if it is a nominal variable with numbers, you will see this icon with 3 little colored balls. And if it is a nominal text variable, if you've entered what SPSS would call string variables, words instead of numbers, you'll see the same icon except it has an A on the lower right that indicates a nominal text variable. Ordinal variables are represented by the bars. And there's also an option for a binary variable or a dichotomous variable. You might remember that from last week where I talked about dichotomous being a variable where you're in one group or the other, you can't be in both, you can't be in neither. For continuous variables, we have the option for interval and ratio. However, JASP treats both of them as scale variables, and they're represented by the ruler. As you work through the 2 videos for this week, you will be introduced to these variables, to the icons, what everything means, and how it can be used. And the great thing about the user friendliness of JASP is that you can experiment a little bit. It's just practically impossible to mess it up, to break it. So if you run an analysis and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't look right, doesn't give you the output that you want, you can uncheck a box and it disappears that analysis and you can get back on track with what you want to be doing instead. So it gives you the freedom to experiment and find out which types of analyses work best for you. I mentioned that if you're going to use JASP with an Excel dataset, it is important that you export the dataset from Excel format into a CSV format. Now this is simple enough to do in Excel. You would go to we've opened up your dataset, and you go to File, Save As, and then in the Save As dialog box, you'll see a list of options. So you'll click on File Format, and you'll choose the CSV option. When it says CSV in the file format, you know you've done it right. You may get a warning that says data will be lost if you save in this format. Well, that's because the CSV format is a very basic format. So if you have bold characters, if you have any kind of formatting or cells that are colored and so forth, all of that would get stripped out. But that warning is there just to say that there will be some kind of data loss. It's not the data loss that we need to worry about. It's not a loss of our numbers. It's just more loss of the formatting. Also, if you have multiple sheets in an Excel worksheet, it will only save the top sheet or the active sheet as the CSV. If you had multiple data sets in the same workbook in Excel, you would have to save them individually as CSV files. Well, once you've done that, you can open that CSV in JASP and get to work. So let's talk about what we're doing for this week. As I said, skills building week. We're going to be focusing on getting good with Excel and also introducing ourselves to JASP. So for this week, we'll be doing a series of Excel tutorials. All of these are on Blackboard. When you click on the folder for week 2, you will see these 10 individual tutorials. They are links to Cengage. It will take you, we'll open up a new window, take you to Cengage, you do these tutorials. What I like about these tutorials is they each come with a video that explains what you're being asked to do, and they have a data set attached. The data set will be structured exactly like what you see in the video. The one difference is that the numbers in the data set that you will be working with are different than the numbers in the video. In other words, you couldn't just watch the video, write down the answers that they got in the video, and then use those to plug into your tutorial. You would follow the steps that were illustrated in the video, do exactly the same thing as what you saw, and then those answers from your actual data set, those are what would go into the answers for your tutorial. The way it's structured is we have 10 of these total, 10 tutorials. They are due at the end of week 2. So if you want to stay on track with the course, complete them by the end of this week. And they are worth 10 points each. Well, the tests are also worth 100 points. So you're going to be able to bank a lot of points this week. The tutorials give you options for check my work, and you can make corrections. So I would say really use this to get those points accumulated and get really good with Excel. Now I will say that I have started working through these tutorials myself. I've thought that I was good with Excel. I've used it a lot, but I have found that I've learned at least one new thing in each of the tutorials that I have discovered. They are very good. So this is a great skills building opportunity to get good with Excel. If you're not familiar with Excel, by the end of this week, you will be. So that's the first thing that we'll do, those 10 tutorials. And then the second will be learning JASP. And this is also on Blackboard. I've created a written tutorial, and then there will be 2 videos for each of the next 3 weeks, total of 6 videos, that you will watch those videos and you can follow along. Now, if you didn't want to watch the videos, if you just wanted to follow along with the written tutorial, you can do that as well. The 2 that we will be learning this week are the introduction to JASP, like what is this program and why are we learning it, and the JASP Workspace. Once you get comfortable with that, we'll do 2 more next week, 2 more the following week, and we will actually be using JASP next week as I teach you how to do, in this case, frequency tables in Excel, and I'll show you, and here's how we do it in JASP. So we'll be using these concurrently from here through the end of the semester. Well, that's what we have to cover in terms of lecture. So what we're going to do now is transition to, we'll go to Blackboard, and we can get to work on some of these tutorials. So what I've done is just set aside the time that we have remaining in class today to begin working on those tutorials. I'm here. I can help you if you want. I'm happy to answer any questions, although the tutorials are very self-contained. But if you need anything, I'll be happy to help you out with that. But this is your time. So if you want to stay here and work, fantastic. You're here, why not? Use the time. When you're done, you don't have to ask permission. You can just go ahead and quietly leave. But just use the rest of the class time to your advantage to get done what we can with the lecture for this, with the tutorials for this week. So I'll just wrap up by asking, do you have any questions about what we're going to do for today or about anything else remaining in the class? Sir?
Is that homework for chapter 1 due on Sunday?
Yes, the homework for chapter 1, or really all the assignments for chapter 1, would be due on Sunday at the end of week 1. That's the soft deadline. So in other words, if you haven't completed the material from week 1 yet, you're starting to fall behind, so you know that. Let's get caught up. The hard deadline would be the end of week 5, when we finish the test. At that point, everything closes, and anything that is left gets graded, and if you haven't completed it, it gets graded as a 0. That's the hard deadline. So right now, yeah, you really need to get week 1 done by Sunday, but if you haven't lost any points yet, just get caught up and stay on track. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for being here this week. I'm going to turn off the video now, and we will get to work on learning Excel and maybe even a little bit about JASP. Thanks.